Today, we live in a very divisive world. Rather than relating to each other with empathy and understanding, we are taught to have a lack of empathy and understanding for people who we believe do not share the same beliefs as us, whether these are political, social, or religious beliefs. And the consequences are dire. No longer do we have this ability to critically think or try to put ourselves in the perspective of others who don't share the same beliefs as us. Immediately, we're taught to have this us versus them mentality and put other people in a box without really trying to have this empathy and understanding towards others. People are slowly losing their ability to critically think and also question the information that they're consuming on the internet to the point where people will consume misinformation, and this information that they believe is their truth dictates the way they see the world and how they treat other people. But before delving into this video, hi everyone, I'm Lonimi Maseko, and on this channel, I make self-development content to help you enhance your quality of life. Let's get straight into this video. So the topic of today's video is the erosion of empathy in a polarized world. But before breaking it down, I'd like to start by asking, what is polarization? According to authors Iyengar et al., they describe this phenomenon as a case where a group of people, which in this case will be group A, will start to develop this hatred and animosity or intolerance towards group B, another group of people who have different political beliefs, religious beliefs, or social beliefs as group A. And as a result, this creates a polarization because no longer are both groups trying to see eye to eye or trying to achieve common ground. They essentially see each other as the enemy and therefore attack them for having different beliefs as them. So, in the article, The Psychology of Polarization, Affective Division, and the Collapse of Civic Empathy, which was published and written by the author R.J. Starr in 2021, his main thesis was that the lack of empathy in our society, or the less empathetic we become towards people who have different political beliefs as us, the more likely we are to dehumanize other people, and this gets empowered through a group hive mentality. So no longer are we trying to establish common ground or see eye to eye. We just immediately want to categorize the other, put each other in a box, and really not try to have a conversation to understand other people. It's mainly to have conversations to impose views on other people and basically dismiss or have an intolerance towards other people who we believe is a threat to our political beliefs. And I don't know about you, but one main example I can think of right now, as somebody that lives in Canada, is take a look at what happened earlier, a couple of months ago, with regards to the federal elections. The race was mainly between the Liberal Party of Canada and the Conservative Party of Canada. At that time, one felt like they couldn't really share their political beliefs in public because immediately, if you share your political beliefs, you get attacked, you can even lose your job, or you can even lose friendships because you don't feel free, or you don't feel like you have a freedom of speech to express your beliefs without feeling like you are going to get persecuted for them. And this is something I've seen over and over and over again in a political climate. Another example, for example, is what's happening in the United States, the polarization between Democrats and Republicans. And we see that with the tragedy that occurred with regards to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, a right-wing political figure, and rather than having empathy for the way he was brutally murdered and trying to understand why this happened, already people who didn't agree with his political beliefs or religious beliefs are immediately going online to celebrate what is a complete tragedy. So these are the type of examples that I can think of to really support Starr's main argument about how the lack of empathy in our society drives us to become more dehumanized. From a neurological standpoint, Starr argues that the roots of polarization can be traced back to how we use the amygdala, which is the part of our brain that allows us to process our emotions. So there was this experiment that was conducted in the 2000s where neuroscientists they wanted to examine how a group of people who affiliated with a political group or had strong political beliefs, how they used what kind of brain activity went on with this type of people compared to just the average person that didn't really have any strong political beliefs or affiliations. And what they noticed during their experiment was that the group of people who had strong political beliefs and strong political affiliations, they tended to rely excessively on the amygdala to make sense of the world, and their ability to reason and critically think eroded, and they no longer relied on the prefrontal cortex, which allows them to reason, to make sense of the world. They were relying more on the amygdala to make sense of the world, right? And the conclusion of this experiment was that the more we activate the amygdala, right, to just make sense of everything, the less empathetic we are in a polarized world towards people who don't have or share the same political beliefs as us. And I found this experiment very interesting because psychology, what the author does essentially is try to build this bridge between psychology and politics. And the author really does a good job at demonstrating how a lot of the reasons why people behave in a political setting can all be rooted and traced back to their neurobiology, to psychology, and it's just incredibly fascinating. The lack of empathy in a polarized world can also be traced back to the group mentality phenomenon. So according to Starr, he argues that what fuels polarization is that groups that adhere to a political ideology feel the sense of belonging to the political group or community, or the sense of community that they construct by affiliating themselves with people who share their same political beliefs, right? And what happens through time is that the line between one's individuality and identity and this group that they feel a sense of belonging to, those type of identities, the group identity and the personal identity, the lines get blurred. So what ends up happening is that when they essentially meet other people who don't share their political beliefs, rather than relating to them from like an individual perspective, they immediately resort to this group identity or this group mentality that they feel comforted by. And this is what encourages them to just completely have a lack of empathy for people who don't share the same political views as them, because they view these people as a threat to the group that they belong to. They feel the sense of community and belonging to, right? And even in their article, the study that was published by the authors Iyengar et al. In 2018, they basically were arguing that people nowadays who feel like they don't affiliate with the political beliefs of other people or religious belief of other people, what ends up happening is that they are less likely to build relationships with other groups of people with whom they don't have the same political, social, or religious beliefs as, right? And I really found that very interesting because this is something that I see time and time again. We even see that in culture. We see how as soon as somebody feels like another person doesn't share their political beliefs or religious beliefs, there's this kind of like divide that takes place. And rather than just seeing that person for their humanity and for what they've done and everything, like immediately there's this like internal shutdown that happens when when one perceives that the other person could be a potential threat to their political beliefs. So, the lack of empathy in a polarized world can be traced back to the role that the media plays in society. So, this us versus them mentality is something that is reinforced through media consumption, as Starr argues. What we end up noticing is that the mainstream media, depending on who the leading government is, especially in a polarized society, the leading government will influence mainstream media to curate this crafted piece of information that constantly gets divulged or shared with the public. And as a result, what ends up happening is that we become victims of misinformation, right? Because we're constantly exposed to what the media is sharing with us. And this is something that happens time and time again. It not only does it happen through mainstream media, but it also happens through social media algorithm. So I don't know about you guys, but have you ever noticed that, let's say you are on social media, it could be Instagram, it could be TikTok, it could be YouTube. Let's say that you are engaging with a specific content. It's not like you intend to be that, you just curiosity led you to engage with a specific content. And the next thing you know, through the algorithm, you're being fed the same echo chamber of information you engaged with a couple of minutes ago, and you get fed that same information over and over again, like an echo chamber. And this is what Starr he argues in his article, that we have become so polarized that we are not even able to really transcend the information that is being given to us, whether through social media or mainstream media. We instantly feel kind of like caged with this curated piece of information that we're constantly being fed by the media without really questioning the information we're consuming and without really doing some work to, critically think and self educate ourselves. And this is something that we see constantly. So, the more people are exposed to mainstream media, according to Starr, the more it encourages people to become hostile towards political rivals. And this, Starr argues, results towards the lack and erosion of empathy. So, why is civic empathy important? According to Starr, civic empathy is integral to human relationships and collaboration. Through empathy, we're able to have open discussions and try to understand each other, even if we don't really agree on the same topics, right? Empathy really allows us to understand each other's worldviews, have open dialogues, healthy debates, and relate to each other as human beings. The other thing that Starr highlights is that empathy is also integral to democracy, because in a democracy, we are able to have this freedom of speech and we're able to hear what other people have to say and, disagree with other people and not feel like our reputation is on the line, our jobs are on the line for disagreeing with other people, or for exerting our human rights to have this freedom of speech. And when civic empathy gets eroded in a polarized world, directly it undermines democracy, according to Starr. So, Starr he also goes on to argue that there's a form of social alienation that happens when people, through the lack of empathy, they basically dehumanize other people for having different political beliefs as them. So they kind of have this pick and choose on who they get to empathize with in public, right? So if that person has the same political beliefs as you, then you feel that it is appropriate to exert empathy towards that person. But if, let's say, it's another person who you really didn't really see eye to eye with, and they didn't have the same political or religious beliefs as you, then that's when you withhold your empathy and feel like they're not deserving as a human being of your empathy. And this is what Starr highlights, that civic empathy is not this pick and choose thing that you get to do, this selective empathy that you get to do. Civic empathy is something that you apply to everybody in this collective consciousness that unite us on earth. So how does a person apply civic empathy? So before I give my tips, and before I give some of the tips that Starr, the author, provides, I'd like to start off by saying that, and be completely transparent with you guys. When I'm talking about the lack of empathy in a polarized world, as I was trying to craft this video and to try to think of what I was going to say, I noticed that this is something that we constantly have to, be very vigilant and aware of. Because if we're not careful, I have been I have fallen into this, state of mind where I wasn't careful and I allowed the media to influence my thoughts, to influence the way I interacted with other people, and even influence the way I interacted with the people I love, whether it was friends or family. So by no means am I doing this video from this position of that I have it all figured out. Actually, this is a constant battle. I believe that the world that we live in, it is a constant battle for the human soul. We constantly have to think about our values, our moral values, and what makes us the human beings that we are. And empathy is something that I believe it's something that is hard to do, especially in a world that constantly wants you to be apathetic, meaning that you don't care. You resort to the lack of understanding, the lack of kindness, the lack of compassion towards other people, even people with whom you don't see eye to eye. So, this is something that is a constant, a daily battle for the human soul. And I'm learning to this day how to do that every single day. It's something that we all learn every day. But I want you to know that it's something that we're learning together, right? We constantly have to learn this together, constantly have to pray about it and seek guidance on, right? So, how can one apply civic empathy? So, Starr argues in his 2021 article that one of the remedies to polarization is empathy, and empathy starts with you starting by having a strong sense of your identity. So, when you have a strong identity, you know who you are as a person, you already know your intrinsic moral and values outside of what mainstream media is telling you, outside of what other people are telling you. It allows you to have this kind of like filter between you and the outside world. So, let's say you interact with other people and they are trying to influence your thoughts. You are able to filter out the parts that you don't really need because you have a strong sense of identity. You know who you are as a person beyond what other people are telling you. And when it comes to my personal tips, I will take it all the way back to a biblical standpoint. So, from a biblical standpoint, we can already see how empathy is practiced all throughout the New Testament in the way in which Jesus Christ was able to relate with humanity. Jesus Christ, he came all the way down from heaven and he interacted with some of the most, he interacted with people who ideally you wouldn't think that somebody who was in heaven would do. He came down on earth and then he interacted with destitutes, he interacted with prostitutes, with murderers, with people who were ill, he interacted with people who were possessed spiritually, he interacted with so many kinds of people through his love and empathy. I believe he was the most empathetic person and still to this day is the most empathetic person to have ever walked on the earth. And I take great example from the way he carried himself, from the way he was so empathetic towards other people. And his teachings basically taught humanity to love, to have compassion and kindness towards our neighbors. And this is something that we can apply today perfectly in a polarized world, in a world that wants you to think in this one dimensional way by immediately antagonizing or alienating people who don't share the same views as you. You can choose to do something different. It's not the easy journey, but you can choose to be empathetic and you can choose to have grace and patience towards other people who don't share the same views as you, because this is what Jesus essentially teaches in the Bible. And another way that you can also apply civic empathy, if let's say you're not a believer, is it starts from the comfort of your own home. When you're having a conversation with, let's say, a coworker, a friend, an acquaintance, a family member, and you can already sense that you don't really share the same political views with, then what you can start to do is practice understanding and listening, active listening. When you try to ask questions and you're actively listening and you're not really having the conversation to impose your views, but to really listen to what they have to say and understand why they think the way they do, that automatically is a form of empathy that you're practicing, that you're putting into practice by actively listening to what other people have to say. So this is something that I highly encourage. I can't stress enough the number of times in my life where I've had conversations with people with whom I did not agree with politically, religiously, and socially. We didn't really see eye to eye. But I what I've really tried to do is to have this to practice put into practice active listening. Ask by asking question, asking why the person I'm interacting with or engaging with thinks the way they do. And when you are able to ask questions like that, you most of the time you would really get to know the person. It really allows you to put yourself in their shoes and empathize for the perspectives that they have. And you get to have an exchange, and before you know it, you can even achieve common ground on some of the things that you don't agree with. So this is something that I highly encourage, to have open conversations and to really do a lot of active listening rather than having conversations to impose your views or to just hear the sound of your voice talking. Because at the end of the day, God, He gave us what? One mouth and two ears to listen. And there's a reason for that. Anyways, guys, if you made it to the end of this video, I'm so glad you did. Again, we're all on this journey together. It takes one person, honestly, in this world to show empathy and kindness, and it will have a ripple effect on the human race. Even if you are watching this video and you're like, okay, but I'm just one person. If I start to become empathetic, maybe I will get ridiculed for that, or people will not take me seriously, or they will shun me. I'm here to tell you it takes one person, because the one act that you're doing of kindness, you may not even realize it could inspire other people to also spread that kindness, and they may never tell you that you inspired them positively, but just by the way you carry yourself and you present yourself in the world, you may not even realize that you're inspiring so many people to also do the same thing, to also have empathy and kindness, and it has a ripple effect. Anyways, guys, but that's a topic for another day. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.